Bhaktavinda ki.
Jai.
Shri Radha Krishna Govardhana Chyama Kundara Kunda Girivarana ki.
Jai.
Damandama ki.
Jai.
Pradama ki.
Jai.
Napuridama ki.
Jai.
Swami ki.
Jai.
Punavadivdama ki.
Jai.
Rangamainamai ki.
Jai.
Bhakti Devi ki.
Jai.
Upachan Sabhukti Sibhushan ki.
Jai.
Nam Sankirtan Yagya ki.
Jai.
Jai Gaur Premanandi.
Hari Hari Bol.
Bol.
Shama Veda Bhakta Vrinda ki.
Hare Krishna.
All graces some devotees.
Hare
Krishna.
All graces some devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All graces some devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All graces Sri Sri Guru Angoranga Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, Divinity and Divine Service, text number 24. Partiva Taruno Dumas Tasmadagnistrayi Maya Tamasastu Rajas Tasmad Sattvam Yat Brahmadarshanam. Please chant.
Hare Krishna. Parthivad Daruna Dhumas Tasmadagnistrayi Maya Tamastastu Rajastasmat Sattvam Yad Brahmadarshanam.
Partiva daruno dhumas tasmadagnistrayi maya tamasastu rajas tasmat sattvam yad brahma darshanam.
Partiva daruna dumas tasmadagnistrayi maya tasmastu rajas tasmat Sattvam Yad Brahma Darshanam.
Parthivaruno Dhumasta Samadhani Srimulha Namastastu Rajasta Samatastavam Yad Brahma Darshanam.
Parthivaruno Dhumas Tasmadagnistrayi Maya Tamasatu Raja Tasmat Sattvam Yad Brahma Darshanam.
Partiva Daruna Dhumas Tasmat Agnistrayi Mai Tasmat Surajas Tamat Tasmat Sattvam Yad Brahma Darshanam. Hare Krishna.
Partivat, from earth. Daruna, firewood. Dumaha, smoke. Tasmat, from that. Agni, fire. Trai, Vedic sacrifices. Mayaha, made of. Tamasaha, in the mode of ignorance. Two, but. Rajaha, the mode of passion. Tasmat, from that. Sattvam, the mode of goodness. Yat, which. Brahma, the absolute truth. Darshanam, realization. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Okay.
Firewood is a transformation of earth, but smoke is better than the raw wood. And fire is still better, for by fire we can derive the benefits of superior knowledge through Vedic sacrifices. Similarly, passion, rajas, is better than ignorance, tamas. But goodness, sattva, is best, because by goodness one can come to realize the absolute truth. Purport. As explained above, one can get release from the conditioned life of material existence by devotional service to the personality of Godhead. It is further comprehended herein that one has to rise to the platform of the mode of goodness, sattva, so that one can be eligible for the devotional service of the Lord. But if there are impediments on the progressive path, anyone, even from the platform of tamas, can gradually rise to the sattva platform by the expert direction of the spiritual master. Sincere candidates must, therefore, approach an expert spiritual master for such a progressive march. And a bona fide expert spiritual master is competent to direct a disciple from any stage of life, tamas, rajas, or sattva. It is a mistake, therefore, to consider that worship of any quality or any form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is equally beneficial. Except Vishnu, all separated forms are manifested under the conditions of material energy. And therefore, the forms of material energy cannot help anyone to rise to the platform of sattva, which alone can liberate a person from material bondage. The uncivilized state of life, or the life of the lower animals, is controlled by the mode of tamas. The civilized life of man, with a passion for various types of material benefits, is the stage of rajas. The rajas stage of life gives a slight clue to the realization of the absolute truth in the forms of fine sentiments in philosophy, art, and culture, with moral and ethical principles. But the mode of sattva is still a still higher stage of material quality, which actually helps one in realizing the absolute truth. In other words, there is a qualitative difference between the different kinds of worshiping methods, as well as the respective results derived from the predominating deities, namely Brahma, Vishnu, and Hara. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langaite girim yat kripadamaham vande Sri Guru Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanyeshwaram Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Partivadaruno Dumas Tasmad Agnistrayi Mayaha Tamasastu Rajas Tasmad Sattvam Yat Brahmadarshanam. Firewood is a transformation of earth, but smoke is better than the raw wood, and fire is still better. For by fire we can derive the benefits of superior knowledge through Vedic sacrifices. Similarly, passion, rajas, is better than ignorance, tamas. But goodness, sattva, is best, because by goodness one can come to realize the absolute truth. Hare Krishna. So here we have another analogy, as we have heard yesterday. Analogies are powerful when they have a lot of similarities. Then you can see the relation to our scenario and what meaning, what impact it will have on our life. So here the topic are the three modes of material nature, their qualitative nature, and their hierarchy, and how to get out of them. Now, the mode of ignorance is qualified by inertia, indolence, and sleep. People do not know who they are, or where they're going. Sounds pretty familiar, right? Current scenario of most people in this world, mode of ignorance. So in that mode, there is always fear. There's always fear, and people are suffering a lot, because when you're fearful, you're constantly in agony. You're constantly in despair. What is going to happen next? And you go from one tragedy, from one trouble to the next. So that is the unfortunate situation of most living entities in this age of Kali. Therefore, the Vedas instruct us, tamasima jyotirgama, come out of the darkness, come to the light. When you're in darkness, you don't know where you're going. So you're always afraid, I'm going to bump my head, I'm going to step on something. What if there's a snake? What if a tiger comes and eat me? So, but as soon as the light of the day comes up, then as soon as the sun rises in the sky, all that fear of darkness and unknown is dissipated. It goes away immediately. Therefore, Krishna Surya Sama, Maya Haya Andhakara, Yahan Krishna Tahan Maya Maya Ardikara, that ignorance is Maya, it is illusion. But as soon as the Krishna sun rises, then all that ignorance and all that nescience and that darkness and even that cloud or haze will immediately evaporate. I don't know how many of you have been on parikrama, but it is a very regular occurrence. When you go on parikrama, you start walking around 5 o'clock or 5:30, right after Mangalarti. And then usually there's some fog. And you start chanting, Jeev Jago, Gaura Chandra Bole, Kota Nidra Jao Maya, Pisachira Kole, and other songs of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And then as you start walking, still it is dark. But after a short while, like usually 5:30, 5:45, then the light comes up. And it's not the sun yet, but the light comes up, which shows that you don't have to be fully in the know. Even if you're in the vicinity of goodness, you still get the benefit of the light. You still get the benefit of the light. So then from ignorance, obviously, the next step up is rajas. It is the mode of passion. The world is awake and everyone is running around frantically. And the mode of passion is characterized by great striving and struggle, hard work, and greed, excessive greed. People want to enjoy, they want to amass wealth. So they're always moving about, looking, where is money? Where is money? Where is money? That is their mantra. Rupi, 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 rupi. So that is the mode of passion. And it is the predominant factor in this world, especially in this great country, where capitalism rules. So everything is about the bottom line. What is that number? That last number that everybody wants to know. What is my profit? What is in it for me? What do I get out of this? Yet it has a problem also. Even though in ignorance, there's indolence and sleep, in one sense you can say it is less destructive because the person is not doing much. So he cannot be of much harm to anybody or to themselves. They're just in inertia. But in passion, there is great struggle and strive. Thus, there is also great danger of damage, that people are actually causing destruction. But if there is a little bit of knowledge involved, if there's a little bit of guidance, then they can actually direct their path. So passion is better than ignorance. Of course, different people have different preferences. So some consider ignorance better than passion for what I have just stated. Yet we know, like from this purport, that the analogy is given of fire. Fire is compared to goodness. Initially, a firewood. Firewood is stagnant, it's immobile, and there's no activity. But in smoke there is activity. Smoke is moving. But in fire, there is not only, I'm just consulting Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur here, because he gives a beautiful purport on this verse, that the wood is devoid of quality of action and unable to reveal its nature because it's unconscious. But then smoke has an active nature because smoke is moving about. Smoke is not static. Smoke is always moving. So it is active, but better than smoke is fire, which has the quality of action and revelation. Fire reveals something. So it's not only active, but it also reveals you something. And therefore it is called Trai Mayaha, related to the Vedas, because it is used in rituals mentioned in the Vedas. Vino tasmad gurum prapadyeta jigyasu shreya uttamam shabde parichanishnatvam brahmani upashrayam. There's so many Vedic aphorisms that direct us that we have to inquire from a spiritual master. We have to search out a bona fide guru. And then what do we have to do? We have to engage in yagya. What's that? Shrotriyam Brahmanishtam. How does that one start?
Samit Pani.
Pardon me?
Shamit Pani.
Samit Pani, Shrotriyam Brahmanishtam. Yes, but what's the first two lines? It's still early in the morning. We're trying to get out of ignorance here. So work with me, people. Somebody can look it up. I only hear the ominous echo.
Where's the you can help us out from?
Can't hear anything. Only the noise in the mind.
I don't know if we're, yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, somebody can look it up. So it is stated that you should approach a bona fide spiritual master. How should you do that? With firewood in hand. Because you should collect firewood in order to do yagya. Because by yagya, all auspiciousness is created. When you do that yagya, svaha, 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 you realize that, wow, this is taking the game to a whole other level. Have you ever been at the yagya? I mean, it's a rhetorical question. I'm just trying to get some audience participation here.
Yeah,
Work with me, people, okay? So you can see how as soon as the fire starts and the chanting of mantras happens and the offerings happen, then immediately consciousness rises to a whole other level. Now, you may say, well, what is my chance? We're not doing daily yagya. We're not doing agnihotra. We're not doing these sacrifices. So what is my chance of engaging in yagya? Yagyai sankirtana prayair yajantihi sumedasa. That if you're intelligent, you engage in sankirtan yagya. Because this is the yagya, this is the sacrifice of this age. Krishna varnantisha krishnam sangopangasta parshanam yagyai sankirtana prayair yajantihi sumedasa. So Krishna in this age has appeared as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to inaugurate the congregational chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That is the sacrifice. Now, you may not be carrying firewood, but you can carry books. And you know what books are made of? Guess what? Exhibit number A. Let the court see. Exhibit number A. This is made from paper, and paper is made from wood. So when you're carrying books, you're also carrying wood. So you're fulfilling that Vedic injunction. You're carrying the books and you're distributing the books. And through that sacrifice, you will naturally become purified. So what's Vishnuvat Chakravarti Thakur telling us here? Let me complete his beautiful purport. So Rajas is agitating, and therefore it's superior to Tamas, which is inert. But Sattva, which is devoid of inertia and agitation, is superior. Why? Because it gives a vision of Brahman. And he's quoting from Bhagavad Gita 14:17. Anybody knows 14:17 by heart? Of course, you can look it up, but I can also read it. Sattvat sanjayate jnanam rajaso lobha evacha pramada mohan tamaso bhavato jnanam evacha. Knowledge arises from sattva, greed arises from rajas, inattention, confusion, and ignorance arise from tamas. He continues, it is not obstructive to Shuddha sattva and does not cover it. It does not interfere with seeing Brahman. It is thus an assistant in spiritual life. In other words, because Shuddha sattva is the goal, so sattva is actually the stepping stone. It is the preliminary stage from which to attain transcendence. Tasmat gurum prapadyeta jigyasu shreya uttamam shabde parichanishnatvam brahmani upashamashayam. That's a different verse. Oh, Tad Vigyanartam Sa Guru Meva Vigachet. Thank you so much. We got it. Samitpani Shrotrem Brahmanishtam. To understand these things properly, one must humbly approach, with firewood in hand, a spiritual master who is learned in the Vedas and firmly devoted to the absolute truth. Beautiful. Thank you so much. You can see Sankirtan means teamwork. It's not just one person's job. It's not that there's one speaker and he's entertaining an audience who is more or less attentive or more or less distracted. But we are not looking for spectators. We're looking for collaborators. I was reading a verse in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, which always made me puzzle, and I'm sure you may have come across it. That Tapan Mishra was a learned Brahmin. He was a scholar, but he did not know the goal of life nor the means how to attain it. Have you ever wondered about that one? How you can be learned and a scholar, but not know the goal of life or how to attain it? Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in his purport to Chaitanya Bhagavat, he says that because Tapan Mishra was chanting his Krishna mantra silently, he was not collaborating with others. He was not doing Sankirtan. He was not making plans how to spread the movement. Therefore, he didn't know the goal of life nor the means how to attain it. Now, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met him, he told him what to do. He told him he had to go to Varanasi, Prayag, and to Varanasi and to wait for him and to prepare because Mahaprabhu would come there very soon. So he gave him a mission. So that is what happens when we approach spiritual master. He gives us a mission. And we should take that mission on our head and serve it as our life and soul. Yasya prasadat bhagava prasado yasya prasada nagadikutopi. That by the pleasure of the spiritual master, all perfection is achieved. And if we do not succeed in satisfying him, then there will be no progress. Yasyadeve para bhaktir yatharave tatagurau tasyaite katitahi artha prakashante mahatmana. That this wisdom can be revealed in our hearts by the satisfaction, the pleasure of the spiritual master or the sages who have realized this path in truth. It's like the zip file becomes unzipped and completely manifested in your consciousness. So, how to get out of the modes? That is a big topic in the Vedas, that, as I've mentioned, tamasima jyotirgama, come out of darkness, come to the light, because the living entity is anandamayo bhyasat. It is always blissful. It is full of knowledge, bliss, and it is eternal. Yet, being implicated in the modes of material nature because of our identification due to the ahankar principle, we identify with our situation. Have you ever identified with your situation? Or is it just me?
Yes, absolutely.
It can happen, right? Like all of a sudden you find yourself walking around South Street and you start acting similar to the characters that are on South Street, right? And then you're up on Allen's Lane where everyone's relaxed and a bit more, in a mode of goodness. And you think like, oh yeah, this is nice, There's a bit of space to breathe and not so much anxiety for survival. So it's funny when you travel a lot because the mind always adjusts to the situation that you're in. Sometimes you travel in India and you see people living on a bridge, a whole family just on a tarp. Or here in this great country, you see people living under a bridge. And you think, how can you live like that? Did you ever wonder, how can you live like that? Did that question ever come up in your mind? But then, whichever situation we are in, immediately the mind is starting to identify and is starting to associate with its surroundings. Dhyayato vishaya pungsang sangasteshu bhajayate sangat sanjayate kama kama karodo vijayate. That by contemplating the objects of the senses, attachment arises. And as soon as you become attached, what happens? Then motor passion kicks in. And you think, I want this. This is mine to enjoy. Yesterday, I was driving with Dronacharya Prabhu, and we were just approaching, we drove past City Hall, and we approached the train station. And we saw two homeless persons who were fighting for their spot at the red light. And you could see how, even though they were both in the same situation, they were both in the same trade, but there was rivalry, there was competition, and there was fight breaking out between them. And so it was interesting to observe just how the modes are acting. There's continuous fighting for supremacy. There is never a dull moment. There's always one mode trying to dominate the other. Even when you are in goodness and you think everything's fine, what happens? You fall asleep. Did that ever happen to you? Or is it just me? You got up, you being a good boy or a good girl, you took your shower, you did Mangalarti, and then you chant very sincerely, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And it's like somebody pulled the plug, you know? It's like you're going down. Why? Because the modes are fighting for supremacy. It's as simple as that. It's a practical proof. Yet when we understand the nature of the modes of material nature and what is the antidote, it is inspirational sadhana. It is conscious, undivided attention that we understand. The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. And if I give my full undivided attention, that is a sign of love. That is a sign of respect and appreciation. So, and how can we give that to people if we don't have it ourselves? We can only give what you got. So therefore, when we practice inspirational sadhana and we chant attentively every day, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then we learn the art of being present. Just being, not trying to be somebody, not trying to be somewhere, not trying to avoid something, but just being. And then we realize Krishna is present in that moment. That moment is Krishna. A few weeks ago, I was in Tucson, Arizona, and it was a gem and mineral fair, the biggest trade show for minerals and gems in the world. So hundreds and hundreds of vendors from all over the world selling their gemstones and their crystals and minerals, and buyers from everywhere. So the devotees had distributed large amounts of prasadam, and people got really affected. They really became appreciative. So it was really nice to distribute books there because a lot of the vendors had already taken prasadam, and they could connect the books with the prasadam, and they could understand there's more going on than business here. So I went into one hall, and there was one of the biggest vendors. He had actually three booths in different locations, Russian guy. And I showed him the books, and he said, Bhagavad Gita, Vedas, I know. I said, I know you know, but you can keep it for your team, and you just contribute whatever you like. So he went to his office to get some money, and he came back, and then he held out his hands like this. And he said, guess what is in my hands? And I looked him straight in the eye, and I said, it's $108. The same spirit that's in your heart is also in my heart. And if you read these books, you will learn how to connect to that spirit. So he gave me the $108. We both smiled, and nothing more was said, but everything was communicated. Now, sometimes there's a lot of talking, but not much is communicated. So when we try to get in tune with the internal potency, with the energy of the Lord, Antaranga Shakti, the real purpose of Krishna. Jiva Goswami, in his purport to the prayers of the Vedas personified, the 87th chapter, the 10th canto, says that the cause of the universe is the compassion of the Lord. Krishna has created this fantastic playground just because of his compassion, just like the parents. They want the children to be well. They want the children to grow up healthy. And for that, they allow them to play. Now, those of us who are parents, we understand that. Kids need to play. Otherwise, they will not be normal. Now, of course, what type of play, what kind of activity, that depends on the inclination, that depends on the surroundings, that depends on their nature. But it is natural that children are playful, just like Krishna was very playful. He's known as Makanchor, the butter thief. He's going around and breaking butter pots and feeding it to the monkeys and causing all kinds of mischief. And 5,000 years later, we're hearing about it, we're reading about it, we're discussing about it, and we're very attracted to Krishna's mischief. Nimai, as a small boy, he would go to the Ganges and he would throw mud on the Brahmins who were chanting Gayatri. And he would plunge under the water and swim and then grab them by the feet and pull them out. And they would just go into the water. He would do all kinds of things. He would take away the clothes of the people who are bathing and mix them up. Those are the men with the ladies, vice versa. And in this way, he caused a lot of nuisance. But because it was playful and it was very enjoyable, so everybody became enamored by the wonderful childhood pastimes of Nimai and of Krishna. That is natural. So the point was that spiritual life is not a boring, dull, rote, mechanical activity, but there is a lot of joy. Susukam kartum avyayam. It is joyfully performed. And that is the stage of transcendence, where we direct all our faculties, all our sensory capacity in the devotional service of Krishna. That doesn't mean only our intellect. That doesn't mean only our work. No, that also means our heart. Because the heart is the seat of consciousness. And the heart is the chariot. It is what decides where you're going in life. So wherever your heart is, that's where you're going to be. So figure out, where is your heart? Like we have a saying, like, oh, his heart is not in it. Therefore, he didn't succeed. He didn't believe in it. Now, sometimes you're capable of doing something. You may have all the facility to do something. But unless your heart is invested, unless your emotions are invested, you're not going to go through with it. So Krishna consciousness is not an intellectual exercise. It is also not a karmakanda activity that we're simply doing something in order to get a certain result, a certain fruit. No. Karmakanda, Jnanakanda, Kevala Vishera Bandha, that they are simply pots of poison because they will condition the living entity. Even the mode of goodness conditions the living entity. What does the Bhagavad Gita say? How does the mode of goodness condition us? Anybody? Water break.
It conditions us with knowledge.
And what else?
Doing austerity, not doing relationship with Krishna.
Nope. Knowledge is there. Yes, I know, therefore I'm better than others. That's conditioning. And what's the second one that's mentioned there in that same verse of the Bhagavad Gita? This is Bhakti Shastri here, my friends. Work with me, people. Happiness. Happiness. Yes, very nice. Thank you. It makes me happy. And if it does not make me happy, I won't do it. Remember Arjuna's argument? I don't like this. I don't want to do this. It doesn't make me happy. He's giving all kind of good reasons. So the mode of goodness can also be binding. I can only do things that I understand. I can only do things that give me happiness, that give me joy. Otherwise, I can't do it. Have you ever heard this argument? Did you ever use this argument yourself? Yes. Huh? But then Krishna tells Arjuna, my dear sir, you got to act. You got to act nonetheless because you're Kshatriya. That is your nature. And he didn't speak the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna and then he said, okay, now I'm going to do the job and you can sit on the back of the chariot and smoke ganja. No, he told him, you got to go out and fight. You have to take action because the living entity cannot be inactive. It is not possible for the living entity to be inactive. So these different qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are also exemplified through the three principal deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are there. They're the guna avatars, and they're fulfilling a function. So people who are in different types of modes of nature, they will worship different personalities. So the ones who are in ignorance, they worship Lord Shiva. The ones who are in passion, they worship Lord Brahma. And the ones in a mode of goodness, they worship Vishnu. Now, sometimes the argument arises, who is better? And Giriraj Swami, he made this, he gave this beautiful elaboration that one time he was in an argument in South India, I believe in Chennai, with one very, very dedicated Shaivite who could not accept that Vishnu was the supreme. Because for him, it was all about Mahadev. It was all about Shiva. So he saw that his argument was inconclusive, and he proposed to the gentleman that why don't you wait till Srila Prabhupada comes and then he can settle the argument. And the man, he agreed. So when Prabhupada came, he took a whole different approach to the topic. He did not try to convince the man of the supremacy of Vishnu. He did not argue with the man. He simply asked him a question. He asked the man, what is better? If you offer something and you want something in return, or you serve simply out of pure love and you have no strings attached, nothing that you want from it. And the man understood. And he said, but isn't it possible that I will worship Shiva and I also have that pure love and I don't have any strings attached? I don't want anything in return? Prabhupada said, yes, it's possible, but it's very rare. And majority of the cases, people come with a big shopping list. So the man understood, you see? So this teaches to us that sometimes you can't just counter argue and try to convince the person. Sometimes you have to approach the topic from a different angle. And in this way, it will be solved. Just like here, we have these analogies and we have different examples. And there's a lot of thought being put into how to convince our mind. Srila Prabhupada said, I had to write 80 books to convince you to chant Hare Krishna. Why? Because we're a little stuck in our thinking pattern. If it doesn't make sense, if it's not logical, if it's not appealing, I can't do it. But different places, different situations. Like in Africa, you just bring out the drum. That's all you have to do. I've been there. I guarantee you. You bring out the drum, no questions asked. The whole town comes out. They will dance. I guarantee you, they will dance. They will sing. They will eat your food. You just bring out the drum. Here, you can bring out drums. You can bring out the elephants. You can bring out whatever you want, you know. So you have to see who is your audience. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he discussed philosophy with 5 people. Who were those 5? Tell me. Bhakti Shastri, work with me, people. This is teaching of Lord Chaitanya. There's 5 dialogues. What's the first one?
Shankazi?
No, first one.
Kashmir?
Sarup Damodar?
Nope.
Rupa Goswami.
Correct. Rupa Goswami. Who was the second one?
Sanatana Goswami.
Okay, what is next?
Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya.
Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Then he sends him to meet who?
Ramananda Rai.
Okay, and who's the last one?
Sarup Damodar.
Nope.
Prakashananda Saraswati.
Correct. These are the 5 dialogues which are in Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. In fact, that's the whole book. It's just these 5 dialogues. The whole Teachings of Lord Chaitanya is just these 5 discussions. And besides that, what would Mahaprabhu do? Kirtan and Prasad. Kirtan and Prasad. Yes, he had a little chat with Chankazi. He had a little chat here, but major discussions are these 5. So that shows to us we have to be considerate to our audience. We have to know who are we dealing with and give them what they can take. Sometimes people can only take a smile. Sometimes they can take a few kind words. Sometimes they can take a book or a cookie. So know your audience. And that means we have to be conscious. First, we have to be conscious before we can be Krishna conscious. Just like when people come here to the temple, and believe it or not, they're looking at the building, they're looking at the structure, and they have questions. So, like, you have to walk through the front door like you're a newcomer, you're a guest, and have the same questions. In this way, you will realize what's going on in the mind of a new person. Prabhupada, that's the way how he composed his books. Every night he was up for a couple of hours and he wrote 6 pages every night. Now, some of you are doing still educational projects, and 6 pages is not an easy job, right? To put out 6 solid pages, it is tremendous effort. It is work. So Prabhupada stayed up every night to give us 6 pages. When the secretaries were asking Prabhupada to go faster, he said, no. He said, your job is simply moving your fingers over a typewriter, but I have to think very deeply about each and every word. Because Prabhupada had to make it appealing to the academics, to the intellectuals, the scholars, the devotees, the common men, and the ignorant people. So he had to speak in a language that was universally acceptable. Therefore, we have in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, is that verse being mentioned, that even if such works are imperfectly composed, still people who are honest and they're sincere, they're virtuous, they will accept it. They will hear it and accept it. Actually, that verse is predicting Prabhupada's translation of the Bhagavatam. Not that they're imperfect, but initially the English composition was not to the taste or to the standard of the audience. Then one of his secretaries once said, Srila Prabhupada, is it offensive to say that your books are getting better? Because that would imply that before they were not so great and now they're getting better. And Prabhupada said, no, do you really think so? And he took it as a real compliment. He was really happy to hear that. Because Prabhupada was translating from one foreign language to another. His mother tongue was Bengali, but he translated from Sanskrit to English. Now, that's quite a task. Have you ever translated from one foreign language to another foreign language? It's hard. It's very hard. And you have to actually understand the subject matter. You have to be realized in the topic. You can't just literal translation will not really do. It will not really reach the heart of the audience. So here, in this beautiful purport, Srila Prabhupada is encouraging us not just to rise to the level of goodness, but to use that as a stepping stone towards purified goodness, transcendence, which Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shaptitam, which is the state of Krishna consciousness. And that's why we have the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. We have the morning program. we have our preaching activities. And in this way, we can transcend even goodness, because we understand even goodness can be binding. I don't want to be bound by the golden or silken ropes or chains of, oh, I know better, or, oh, I'm feeling so happy doing what I'm doing. That's why sometimes you see it's harder to wake up a person who is pretending to sleep than a person who is actually asleep. Have you noticed? Have you noticed that it's easier to talk to people in ignorance and in passion than to people who are in goodness? Because they already think they know, they already think they figured it out. So this Krishna conscious movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, and it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to give this Krishna prema freely, what he did not give in Navadvip, because people were critical, they were proud, and they were a little compromised because of their familiarity with him. But when he traveled South India, he freely gave Krishna consciousness, Krishna prema. So much so that it left an indelible impact on South India. And different groups started taking to bhakti. And they're still going with kirtan. They're still practicing. So these are some reflections on today's text. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address you. You're here in the great city of Philadelphia, where many, many great exploits have happened. And this temple here is a labor of love. It's an example of your combined sacrifice and the sacrifice of previous generations who have dedicated their lives to spreading Srila Prabhupada's movement in this great city. So thank you for your dedication, your efforts, and your teamwork to bring this project to the next level, to the next into the next phase. I remember I was here maybe 6-7 years ago, and it looked completely different. I remember clearly Bhakti Churmaraj was down in the old temple room giving a class. I don't know how many of you were there at that time. And a lot of things have changed since. A lot of things have changed since, which shows to us that there's nothing as certain as change. The time factor is moving us all along the trail. And Krishna is time. So to appreciate Krishna means that we join hands and we make our combined effort to further this change and to make this movement more relatable, more impactful, and more accessible to the common public. It is already supremely attractive. Golokera Premadana Harinam Sankirtan. It is very sweet, yet people are suffering because they are being confused by the modes of material nature. So devotees take it upon themselves to do that austerity required to contact people and to help them appreciate Krishna consciousness. We have time for a couple of questions or reflections.
Yes, Prabhu. We have a few minutes here. First of all, thank you very much. Very engaging class, filled with examples that are, I think we could all identify with. Thank you so much. Let's take some questions. Either raise your virtual hand or type it in the chat. First hand up, we have Mitravinda, and then Renika right after them, right after her. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, please set my obeisances. Srila Prabhupada, thank you so much for giving class this morning. You gave a great deal of information, good, really great information, and greatly appreciated. I want to know or ask if you could reflect on the aspects of relationship, because this path of bhakti is greatly inspired by relationships, our relationship with Krishna, our relationship with those we are trying to serve as servants of Lord Chaitanya's mission. And in giving this information, if we're not, as you said before, attentive, present, connected, to the philosophy and the process on the level of being in the way that relates to relating to others. How much can we truly give?
Thank you for bringing up this important point. A relationship in Sanskrit is called sambandha gyan, sambandha. And if you want to have a relationship, you have to start, I mean, in the traditional path, you start with divinity, and then you take it down to the human level. And in the Western approach, the modern approach, you start with I, me, and mine, with identity, sense of self, and then you take it as high as you can, hopefully to divinity. So that's why the Shastra is giving us a very clear understanding of who am I. One time I was walking with Burijan Prabhu, one of my mentors in Govardhan, and he told me, Navina, there's something I wanted to tell you for the last 2 years. So naturally, I started paying attention. And he's expert, master, teacher. So then he said, now is the most important time of your life. You're investing in yourself and in your foundation. So whatever you do now, at this moment, is going to impact your entire life. And then said, always ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, who am I? That's sense of self, identity. Who am I? Then number 2, who do I want to please? Who is in my heart? Is it Prabhupada? Is it my guru? Is it Krishna? Who is there? Who rules your heart? And then number 3, what's your contribution to this ISKCON movement? What is it that you would like to do to make a difference? And I really found that very, very striking. And I added later on, number 4, what am I ready to sacrifice in order to achieve my contribution? So back to your question about relationships. Relationships start when we have a clear sense of identity. Who am I? Who is the other person that I want to have a relationship with? And what is the foundation of that relationship? I tell people always on the street that the foundation for every relationship is appreciation or respect and service attitude. Like at the end, after a conversation, I say namaste. Do you know what it means? It means, respect. I'm appreciating you, not just on a material level, but on a spiritual level. So unless we have that respect and appreciation, which should foster a service attitude, it's really hard to have a relationship. So we're not just buddy-buddy because we happen to live in the same space, or we happen to be in the same country, or we happen to be part of the same, sports club or the same church. No, we should understand that we are all family because we're all part of Krishna's family, of Krishna's creation. So that foundational knowledge is important. Otherwise, the relationships will be superficial and they will not really be satisfying. Okay, we got a few more hands up here. I mean, it's a big topic. You could give a whole seminar on that, but thanks for bringing it up. We got Renuka, we got Suman and Bob. So please.
Thank you, Prabhu, for today's class. How do we foster true unity, like true sisterhood, true brotherhood among the devotees?
We foster that by actually reading these books that we distribute, then we'll realize that we're all part of the same, family. We're all part of the same existence. And that doesn't mean Mayavad, that I am you and you're I, but it means that we understand our qualitative difference, that we're part of something sublime, something more elevated, more unique. And that has to come, first of all, from philosophical understanding. And then when you apply it and you go out there and you meet people and they have, first of all, a little apprehension, they're a little hesitant. But when they see that, oh, you're not here to kill me, you're not here to exploit me, oh, you actually want to help me, then they actually lower their levels of defense and they open up and they're like, okay, what is it? But that means you have to get to that point of equality. And that means you can't have a superiority or an inferiority complex, because that really makes it weird. Sometimes you may have both complexes at the same time. I want everything you have and I hate you for it. You have to have equality that will foster that sense of unity, that sense of friendship, which is a foundational quality where the learning experience can happen. Nowadays, people don't like so much the hierarchy. Okay, you're up here, I'm down here. You teach me, you tell me how it is. That may work in traditional cultures. That works still very well with Russians and certain parts of the Asian demographics. But the modern person functions better in an environment of friendship and of equality. Now we understand that that's just for the learning experience, but there is definitely culture, which means seniority, which means different roles. We're not throwing culture out the window and say everything becomes same. But even Prabhupada himself, he would, for the sake of the group experience, join the GBC and discuss, just like he would be one of them. And then he would get all the points and the information, and he would see if they were able to come to some conclusive verdict. And otherwise, he would give the verdict himself. But his goal was in training these men to become independently thoughtful and self-reliant. And believe it or not, one day your guru will ask you, what is it that you want to do for Krishna? And that might be a scary day in your life, because it's the day where we actually have to start to think and take on responsibility, rather than, oh, I'm just here for the ride, you know? I mean, I'm not in charge. It's the temple president's fault, or it's the GBC's fault. No, what are you going to do to make a difference? Okay, we have a lot of hands up here. I can't see who already asked.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
There is a lot of hierarchy in ISKCON. So with all this hierarchy, how do you unite different sects of people, like, you know, junior, senior, medium level, whatever?
Hierarchy
Like,
is natural. It's there. It's a natural structure that there is hierarchy. But when there is unity in diversity, then you have that harmony. Just like in the body, there's hierarchy. Like you don't walk with your head and you think with your feet, right? So there's hierarchy. But is it a problem? No, there is no problem. It goes naturally. Naturally, it works well if everybody knows their place.
It definitely is a problem for the junior most person.
Well, it depends. Why should it? If the junior most person is taken care of, is well nurtured and protected, there shouldn't be any problem. I remember my most happiest times were when I was a junior in Krishna consciousness. I asked my Sankirtan leader, where are we going today? And he said, wrong question. It's not your business to waste your time thinking of where we're going today. Your business is to go out and distribute the books. I am making the plan and the schedule. And so in this way, we had a division of labor, and it was very blissful. It was very enjoyable. So if we know our role, and we can have interdependence, and we can have trust, love and trust, because of teamwork, because of cooperation and open communication, then everybody just contributes according to their capacity, and everybody receives according to their need. And in this way, everything goes on well. Of course, ideal is utopia. and we're struggling with a few situational challenges in the meantime, but Krishna is doing this to us in order to bring out the love, the surrender, and also the patience and the tolerance, which is another quality or virtue of the mode of goodness. Like, you know, Vishnu, he tolerated Brigu's kicking him in the chest. And that's why he was declared to be the supreme. Whereas Brahma took action, Shiva took action, they took offense. But Vishnu got up and said, oh, I hope I have not hurt your foot, you know? Sorry, I did not acknowledge your presence. What can I do to make you happy? Now I have another class with the Latinos in 5 minutes, and I will just I don't know, Suman Sharma, did you ask
Hare
your
Krishna.
question? Because the hand is still up.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for your very nice class. I learned a lot. The more I hear classes, it looks like the more I have to learn. There's a lot to learn. And I have a question about 3 modes of material nature.
Yes.
And I find it difficult to analyze from moment to moment whether I'm in this, what kind of mode I'm in right now. So I just.
You don't have to analyze. You don't have to analyze. Just chant Hare Krishna. Tadarajastamo bhava kamalobarayaschaye chetayatayaranavidam sitam sattve prasidati. Simply by chanting Hare Krishna, you transcend the modes immediately. As it is stated in the purport, the expert spiritual master can elevate the disciple, whether they be in passion, ignorance, or goodness. So they can come above that. Now here we have another point, that in goodness, people think they're right, and therefore it's difficult to preach to them. Yes, it is difficult. That's why it's harder to preach, to educate people. Yet Prabhupada wanted us to preach to them also. But don't be surprised if they're a little arrogant, argumentative, and proud, because that's their background. But give it your best shot. We shouldn't lose confidence, because you're never the junior most person. The guy who just walks in the door, he's always younger to you. And there is always older people. So hierarchy is always there, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. We have it takes such a bad rep. Like nowadays, people really resent authority and authority figures. Why? Because we have been exploited, and we have exploited others for such a long time. So unless and until we actually embrace the process of Krishna consciousness, and we develop this Krishna bhakti, this pure love for Krishna, that we understand this is what's going to make the difference. It's not about in which capacity you serve. It's not about what is your title. Are you a VP or a TP or a XYZ? No, you're a das. To be the servant in a spiritual context is the highest level. In Christianity, before you can be given sainthood, the first step towards sainthood, you know what it is? You're declared a servant of God. So that's one of the stages towards being declared saintly. So thank you for your kind attention, for giving me this opportunity to address you. I may have to leave you right now and get on another call. Otherwise, my Latino friends will feel abandoned. So
Our
you can have
gratitude
more
to you.
discussion if you like amongst yourself. I am confident that there are many qualified devotees to guide you in this discussion if you want to still take this a little further. So there are many good points that are being brought up, and that's why we have these discussions. Tushyanti cha ramanti cha. We have this ability to churn the nectar of the Bhagavatam, and then what comes out is Prema Pumartha Mohan. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Grantaraj.
All glories to Sri Prabhupada.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Namo Namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare.
Hare Hare
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama.
Hare Rama, Rama
Hare
Rama, Hare Hare.
Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you all very much.
Maybe
Hare
in
Krishna.
future, I will be in your class.
Hare Krishna devotees, have a wonderful Krishna conscious day. Hare Krishna.